Since, for example, when one is practicing, say if one is practicing mindfulness of breathing, then distracting thoughts arise, then one becomes aware distracting thoughts have arisen. So that knowing that distracting thought has arisen, that is, you could say that is one of the functions of sampajanya, clear comprehension. So mindfulness, you could say, is the factor which the awareness itself, this gets a little confusion. How to put this, distinguish them. Okay, a distracting thought has arisen. So mindfulness is what brings that distracting thought to the mind, that which enables one to be aware that the distracting thought has arisen. Then clear comprehension would be, say, what designates it a distracting thought, or which understands that this thought is a distracting thought. So mindfulness makes the thought present to awareness, and then clear comprehension understands it as a distraction. Does that make the distinction clear? To some extent. Okay, so now the third jhana, there's equanimity, mindfulness, full awareness or clear comprehension, and still feeling pleasure with the body. So the pleasant feeling is still present. So he enters and dwells in the third jhana. Okay, so now Sariputta, having entered that state, now he contemplates the factors present in it. And so now the text will enumerate the various factors that are present. So it mentions equanimity, pleasure, mindfulness, the full awareness, and the unification of mind. Then the 5 factors beginning with contact, and then the other factors, zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. And then these states are defined by him individually, distinctly, then they're known as they arise, as they remain present, as they vanish. Okay, we'll move on, and then I'll take questions after we go through a few other states. Okay, now we come to the fourth jhana. Now to move from the third jhana to the fourth jhana, the meditator first masters the third jhana, then he looks into the third jhana and sees that there's still a little imperfection in the third jhana, that there's still maybe like a hair in the soup, so to speak. And what is that hair in the soup in this case? Sukha. Right, it's sukha. It's the pleasant feeling. Of course, normally we all like pleasant feeling. But the pleasant feeling is somehow connected, even at a very subtle level, with some attachment. And so it's a little disturbing to the perfect tranquility of the mind. And distinct from pleasant feeling, there's another kind of feeling which is called a dukkhamasukha vedana, which means the feeling which is neither pleasant nor painful. This is a neutral feeling which is completely quiet and peaceful. And that feeling is what arises in beyond the third jhana, in the fourth jhana. And so the meditator is now aware that there is that neutral feeling, and so he aspires to that neutral feeling. He contemplates the fault of pleasant feeling in the third jhana, continues to meditate, and when the mind, the concentration becomes strong enough, then he moves into the fourth jhana. And so here we have the formula for the fourth jhana. Again, monks, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, Sariputta entered and abided in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure. That's that neutral feeling, and which has purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. So here in the fourth jhana, the mindfulness becomes fully ripened, fully purified, and this purification of mindfulness comes about because of the equanimity. So it's said that, I think in some of the commentaries, that in the third jhana, you would say the mindfulness is like the full moon on a night which is very clear, but there's still a little bit of haze in the sky. So even though you could see the full moon, it's not like our ordinary mind, which is like the full moon on a night with stormy rain clouds, where you just occasionally get the impression of the moon. But in the third jhana, it's like the full moon is like, in the third jhana, it's like the full moon on this night where it's like 90% clear, just 10% little haze, which is occasionally obscuring the clarity of the moon. But on a real like winter night, like middle of January, where the sky is completely clear and it's the full moon, then the moon is so bright and brilliant, and you could see it, just shining and illuminating. Like if you come out on a full moon night like that, and you look at the lake, everything, it's almost you could take a book out and read a book. The moon is so bright. So this is like the mindfulness in the fourth jhana. Okay, so now Sariputta contemplates the factors in the fourth jhana, and here we have some differences introduced. So he sees the equanimity, the neither painful nor pleasant feeling, and now this is, the neither painful nor pleasant feeling is new. And now here we have something that's new introduced, and this is called the mental unconcern due to tranquility. So now, or maybe better than mental unconcern, the mental effortlessness due to tranquility. Because the mind has become so tranquil that no further effort seems needed to maintain the mind in that state. Okay, then there's the purity of mindfulness and the unification of mind. So those are the factors, except for the mental unconcern. The other factors are mentioned in the formula for the fourth jhana. Then we have the five, beginning with contact. Then we have the other factors, zeal, decision, and so forth. So these are defined by him one by one as they occurred, known they arise, known they were present, known they disappeared, and so forth. Okay, so here in the fourth jhana, Okay, at this point, any questions, Stephen?
Okay, I was wondering, since we're told that only in the fourth jhana does this neither pain nor pleasure quality arise, when we investigate Vedana in our regular lives,
Yeah.
can we say then when we feel neutral feelings, which seems quite often we just don't really have any feeling towards it, are we just deluding ourselves?
No, it's actually not, not true that neither painful nor pleasant feeling only arises or first arises in the fourth jhana. In our ordinary experience, also many times there's a neither painful nor pleasant experience, neither painful nor pleasant feeling. For example, just if we're maybe just taking a walk down the street, I say most of the time that there's the neither painful nor pleasant feeling going on. It's just that as one is going up through the jhanas, in the lower jhanas, there are the feeling of pleasure. The pleasant feeling becomes prominent and then increases in intensity, but also in subtlety, until one comes to the third jhana, where it reaches the peak of intensity. But then, beyond the third jhana, there's the fourth jhana, and what makes the fourth jhana distinct is that it has that more peaceful feeling of neither pleasure nor pain. Dave?
Would another word for this be dispassionate? Would that be something that would describe this? That what you're really talking about is a dispassionate observation or awareness?
I think one could put it in that way, except that, you see, the word dispassion enters in different contexts within a Buddhist framework. So there's, say, a dispassion that is involved in developing the jhanas, so that one becomes dispassionate first. To go to the first jhana, one has to become dispassionate, at least to the play of things in ordinary experience. And then to go up from one stage to another, one becomes dispassionate towards the prominent factors of the lower jhanas. So there is a kind of dispassion that comes through ascending these levels of concentration. But then there's another kind of dispassion which comes through insight, where one is seeing distinctly, the arising and falling, or the arising and passing away of phenomena. And then because one sees them as impermanent, then one becomes dispassionate towards them. So it's a different kind of dispassion. Yeah, Matt?
Could you please explain what he means by unification of the mind?
Is there a microphone?
Unification of mind.
Okay. Oh, what is meant by unification of mind? Okay, the question is, what is meant by unification of mind? Okay, unification of mind here would be initially keeping the mind on one object so that the mind doesn't depart from that one object.
Is that not like vichara?
You mean vitaka? Let's say that there's a difference in aspect. The two are close in that vitaka, as I understand it, or as the texts explain it, is what directs the mind to the object, what puts the mind on the object, which focuses the mind on the object. And then I'd say one-pointedness is the quality that emerges. Maybe we could say it that way, that vitaka is a more active quality, and one-pointedness, or mental unification, is a more emergent quality. So one-pointedness is what emerges from the work of vitaka. Vitaka is the activity of lifting the mind and putting it on the object. And as the mind is placed on the object again and again, then it stays on the object, becomes steadied on the object, and doesn't deviate from the object. And then we say that the one-pointedness has emerged and is becoming stronger. That's the way I would express the difference. Okay, let us go on so we could finish today. Okay, so now we've come to the fourth jhana, and these are sometimes called the form realm jhanas, because now the states that lie beyond them are the formless states. And this begins with the first formless state, which is the base of the infinity of space. And so the formula goes that with the complete surmounting of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, aware that space is infinite, Sariputta entered and abided in the base of infinite space. Now, the way it's explained that one moves from the fourth jhana to the base of infinite space, it's said that one has to develop the fourth jhana using a particular object or nimitta which appears visually in front of one as a kind of inwardly visualized form. It would be, sometimes takes the form of a bright circle of light. And that is the object in the jhanic state. And now to move to the formless states, one takes that bright light or bright colored disk and expands it and extends it till it seems to cover everything in one's field of mental vision. So one expands it boundlessly. Then one removes the visible or the visualized form. One makes the determination sort of to roll it up and put it aside, just like if you have a carpet in the living room and you want to redecorate the living room, you roll up the carpet and bring it out and put it in the hall. And so you roll up that carpet and put it aside, or you roll up that mentally visualized form and put it away. And what remains when one removes the form is the space that the form was occupying. So now there's just space there with no form. And so this is the disappearance of the perception of sensory impact, or the overcoming of perception of form. And so now one enters and dwells in the base of infinite space. And so now in the list of states in the base of infinite space, it's said that there's the perception of the base of infinite space and the unification of mind, still very prominent. Then all of the other factors are the same. Okay, we go through all of those, it's all the same. Now moving from the base of infinite space to the next second level of formless attainments, the base of infinite consciousness. Okay, now the meditator in the base of infinite space is aware that space is infinite. And so there is that awareness of infinite space, and the awareness here is consciousness. So one is conscious of infinite space. So now instead of attending to the infinity of space, one makes a subtle redirection of the awareness to the consciousness of infinite space. It's just like, okay, to use a rather mundane example, I'm here, sitting here now, aware of a classroom full of tables, chairs, students, lights, a roof, and so on. But I could redirect my attention from the object of focus on the classroom or library reading room to my awareness of the reading room. And so now instead of, it's a little weird, even when I do that, it gives a weird feeling. So you just redirect the attention from everything outside. You try it, but don't slip into samadhi. So you're sitting there, like normally you're just looking at me, and I hope so, listening attentively or taking notes. But now you could just sort of refocus on your awareness of the room with the other students and the teacher and desks and tables and desks and chairs and so on. But that example pertains to rather very ordinary objects. But now one is doing the same thing with this very exalted object, shifting from infinite space to the consciousness of infinite space. And so one gets the sense of the infinity of consciousness. And when we use like this expression, infinity of consciousness, if you read like some of the books of the mystics, you get a kind of glorification of infinite consciousness, like this is the ultimate, this is the supreme, this is the highest state. But in Buddhism, that's not the case. Like this is just, it's a very high meditative state, but it's just a mundane state which is constituted of mental factors. It's impermanent, bound up with dukkha, not to be taken as I, mine, myself. Okay, now to pass from the base of infinite space to the from the base of infinite consciousness to the third attainment. This is called the base of nothingness. Again, one has to redirect one's attention. And so the text says, again, monks, by completely surmounting or overcoming the base of infinite consciousness, aware that there is nothing, Sariputta entered and abided in the base of nothingness. Now the base of what's called the base of nothingness here, akinchanyayatana, the word nothingness here has nothing to do with emptiness or sunyata. The sunyata is a philosophical concept which is used in relation to wisdom or insight. Especially in Mahayana Buddhism, it becomes like the ultimate nature of all phenomena is emptiness. But the nothingness spoken of here is not related to emptiness in that philosophical sense, but it's just the designation for a very high state of meditative concentration. And this is attained by redirecting the attention from that infinite consciousness to the absence of any kind of obstructedness or solidity in that infinite consciousness. So it's focusing on the unobstructedness of the infinite consciousness, that absence of any impediment in the infinite consciousness. I see some of you are looking at me with puzzled expressions. It's pretty abstract, So if you don't understand, I've done my best. But just think, maybe it's easy to do it with space rather than consciousness. We look at space, so I could focus on space as the capacity for occupancy. So that's the normal conception of space. So within that space, we could have tables, chairs, a thermos flask, cups, and so on. Everything fits into space. So that's the nature of space, is to be able to, for things to occupy it. But we could also focus on the aspect of space as being without any obstruction. So if you just take space itself, rather than the things in space, there's just no impediment, no obstruction. So if I want to go from here to that table, what will be obstructing me is this table. But if there's just space there, nothing else in the space, I can move without any obstruction. So just think that consciousness also is, in a sense, without any obstruction, without any impediment. Within that infinite consciousness, there's nothing solid, nothing substantial impeding it or blocking it. So in that way you get the aspect of nothingness. Okay, so then Sariputta contemplated the states in the base of nothingness. The only new one here we have is the perception of the base of nothingness. Everything else the same. So now we'll move on to the fourth attainment. So then this is expressed very simply. By completely surmounting the base of nothingness, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So this is the fourth formless meditation, in which perception has become so subtle, so fine, that it's difficult to say whether it's present or not. In fact, it said that perception is present there, so it is a state with perception, but the perception is so refined and so subtle that one can't, clearly distinguish its function. So that's why it's said that one could also say that there's no perception there. Again, that's a little bit abstract. But now this is interesting with regard to the base of neither perception nor non-perception. It's said that, you see, in the other description of the other attainments, it seems as if Sariputta is contemplating those factors within the attainment itself, even though according to the commentaries or the traditional explanation, it said to contemplate them, he has to come out from the attainment. But here it said, with the fourth formless meditation, he emerged mindful from that attainment. Having done so, he contemplated the states that had passed, ceased, and changed thus. So indeed, those states, not having been, come into being, and having been, they vanish. And then regarding those states, he abided unattracted, unrepelled, independent, detached, dissociated, with a mind rid of barriers, and so on. So you'll see that here, it's not said that Sariputta contemplated the factors, those states, one by one as they occurred. And the reason is that this fourth formless attainment is so subtle, and all of the factors there have been brought to such a state of subtlety and refinement that it's impossible, even for somebody with the sharpness of Sariputta, to contemplate the actual individual factors within that attainment. The only one who can do that, it said, is the perfectly enlightened Buddha, the Sammasambuddha. But these, amongst all of the disciples, even the wisest like Sariputta, there's still a limit to their ability to distinguish those factors. And so if somebody like Sariputta had trouble distinguishing those factors, don't worry if even the names of these states are something of a puzzle. So what Sariputta has to do, he's able to enter that attainment, but what he has to do is to emerge from it, and then he knows that the states that were present there have now vanished. And so he realizes that when he entered the attainment, they came to be, and now that he's emerged from it, they vanish. But he can't contemplate those actual states themselves. David?
Emergence from
Yeah.
states.
Yeah.
One can enter into them again.
Oh, of course, he could, yeah.
So what sort of is the, if one gets to a particular level, when one begins meditation, do you go right to that level, or do you have to go through all of these stages all over again?
After one has mastered all of the levels? I think it's not necessary to go through the earlier stages. One makes the determination, I want to go into the base of neither perception or non-perception, and then one will go into it. Okay, but Sariputta, let's finish up. So Sariputta understood that there is an escape beyond, and so now the escape beyond, it said that, here in paragraph 19, again, monks, by completely surmounting the base of neither perception nor non-perception, Sariputta entered upon and abided in, this is a state called the cessation of perception and feeling. In Pali, it's called Sanya Vedaita Nirodha. Okay, so this is a state in which all perception, all feeling, and it's said even that all consciousness ceases, all mental functions cease. And it's said that whereas the 8 previous meditative attainments can be entered through the power of samadhi, to enter the cessation of perception and feeling, one has to bring together both samadhi and wisdom, samadhi, concentration, and insight. So to enter this, what one does is here one has to go through the gradual, step by step, through the 8 attainments. One enters the first jhana, comes out of it, contemplates its factors with insight as impermanent, dukkha, non-self. Then one goes into the second jhana, contemplates the factors, impermanent, dukkha, non-self, and so on with the third jhana, fourth jhana, up to the base of nothingness, One comes out from the base of nothingness, contemplates its factors, impermanent, dukkha, non-self. Then one makes the determination to enter the cessation of perception and feeling. Then one directs the mind to the meditative object, and then one goes into the fourth formless attainment, neither perception nor neither perception nor non-perception. One goes into that for just a few turns of consciousness, and then all the mental activity ceases. The body, of course, continues to function, but the breathing has already stopped. And then one remains in that state for a predetermined time, and then one comes out. And it's said that this state, the base of, or the cessation of perception and feeling, is accessible only to non-returners and arahats. Okay, so Sariputta enters that state, and then the text adds, this is a little puzzling why it adds this here, it says, and his taints or his asavas were destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. So it's a little bit of a puzzle. Where and when, or when did Sariputta contemplate with wisdom in order to destroy his defilements, his taints or asavas? He couldn't contemplate with wisdom in the attainment itself, because there's no mental activity there. Could it be that he emerged from that attainment and then contemplated immediately after emerging and then destroyed the defilements? But then there's a contradiction between the account of Sariputta's enlightenment in this sutta and an account given in another sutta, which we must have covered maybe about a year ago. This is sutta number 74 in the Majjhima Nikaya, the very end of the Dighanakha Sutta, towards the very end of the Dighanakha Sutta. It's on page 606, and it's paragraph 14. Here, the Buddha is speaking to a wandering ascetic by the name of Dighanakha, Long Nails, who is said to be Sariputta's nephew, according to one account, his uncle on another account. And the Buddha is explaining to him the contemplation of feeling. And Sariputta is just standing next to the Buddha, fanning him. So it must have been a hot day, and Sariputta is fanning him and just listening in on the discourse. And while Sariputta is listening, Sariputta reflects that the Blessed One is speaking about the abandoning of things through direct knowledge. He's speaking about the relinquishing of these things through direct knowledge. And then as the Venerable Sariputta considered this, through not clinging, his mind was liberated from the taints. So according to this account, Sariputta achieved arahantship not through entering and emerging from particular meditative attainments, but he was, fully conscious in what we would call a ordinary state of consciousness, listening to the Buddha give a discourse, reflecting on the discourse, and then on that basis, he gained insight and eradicated the defilements. Where according to Sutta 111, Sariputta entered each of these attainments and emerged, and then at a certain point it said, by seeing with wisdom, his taints were destroyed. So it's difficult to bring the two accounts together. Anyway, we'll just continue to close up the discussion. So then it said that, in paragraph 20 here, Sariputta emerged mindful from that attainment. And now there's no states to be contemplated within that attainment itself. But having done so, he recalled the states that had passed, ceased, and changed thus. It seems that this must be referring to his experience before entering cessation. So indeed, those states not having been, come into being, having been, they vanish. And regarding those states, again, he abided unattracted, unrepelled, independent, detached, free, dissociated with a mind rid of barriers. Then he understood there is no escape beyond, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is not. Okay, then the sutta ends with a kind of paean of praise to Sariputta. So it says, the Buddha says, rightly speaking, were to be said of anyone, he has attained mastery and perfection in noble virtue, in noble concentration and noble wisdom. He's attained mastery and perfection in noble liberation. It is of Sariputta indeed that this should be said. Rightly speaking, were to be said of anyone, he is the son of the Blessed One, born of his breast, born of his mouth, born of the Dhamma, created by the Dhamma, and heir in the Dhamma, not an heir in material things. It is of Sariputta indeed that rightly speaking this should be said. Monks, the matchless wheel of the Dhamma set rolling by the Tathagata, by the Buddha himself, is kept rolling rightly by Sariputta. Okay, so that's what the Buddha said, and then the monks were satisfied and delighted in his words. So what do you think? What's the impression? Osmond, yeah. Maybe take the microphone. I think one has to leave a little distance between the box and the phone itself.
Okay, as far as the destruction of the taints in 111, it sounds like to me that it would be just the lower taints.
It would be what?
Just the lower taints.
I don't think so, because when that expression is used, just about everywhere it's used, it always signifies the attainment of arahantship. It's sort of like a stock, formulaic expression.
The reason why I said that is because of, at this point, he is only a non-returner. He's not an arahant yet, which means the 5 lower feathers have been destroyed.
Oh, that, I see what you mean. But it would seem that the lower fetters have been destroyed. So what this would be referring to, this would have to be referring to the subtler level of the fetters, the subtler fetters that remain.
Right.
Oh, I see. I thought you said that okay, I see your point. But I think in both passages, 74, Sutta 74, and this one, it's referring to this, in both places where that expression, having seen with wisdom his taints were destroyed, is referring to his attainment of arahantship. But there's still that contradiction there. At least it seems to me a contradiction. In one, he's attaining it while reflecting on a discourse he's heard from the Buddha. In 111, he's attaining it after emerging from this attainment of cessation. I don't remember what the commentary says. Maybe it says that while he was listening to the discourse, he very quickly, momentarily entered cessation, then came out and reflected, but that doesn't sound so conceivable to me. That while standing there fanning the Buddha, he's going to enter into cessation. It would seem he would be sitting cross-legged on the floor in a private place. Anyway, I'll tell you my impression, then we'll break for lunch. I told you that there's no counterpart in any of the other, parallel collections of texts, like the Chinese agamas, Sanskrit fragments that have been discovered, other parallels to the Pali Nikayas, no parallel to the sutta, no counterpart to the sutta. So my supposition is that this sutta is a little bit apocryphal. That means a little bit of a later compilation which was inserted into the Majjhima Nikaya. And it represents, as I said last week, or the last class, something of the process of evolution from the sutta, from the early texts, the Nikayas, towards the Abhidhamma. As we start to get the Abhidhamma flavor here of analyzing a state of consciousness into its constituents. And perhaps the purpose is to extol Sariputta, because you see that there's this, at the beginning of the sutta, there's this, the Buddha praises Sariputta as one with vast wisdom, sharp wisdom, quick wisdom, broad wisdom. And then at the end, he says that if anyone is to be called a son, if speaking rightly, one were to call anyone a son of the Buddha, born of his breast, and so on, it is of Sariputta that one would say this. One might conjecture that there could have been a little bit of competition for the position of leading disciple after the Buddha passed away, except that, according to all traditions, I think Sariputta passed away a few months before the Buddha passed away. So there's no question here of, we call this the horse race between, or the race for prominence. I don't like to use these words in relation to the great monks. But you could see like maybe groups of disciples want to push their teacher up into first place. So you could see a group centered around Sariputta wants to get Sariputta in number one spot. A group around Ananda wants to get Ananda in number one spot. The group around Mahakassapa wants to get Mahakassapa number one. But Sariputta passed away before the Buddha did, so that kind of position wouldn't make sense. So maybe it's in a way to glorify the memory of Sariputta. We don't know. But I'll leave you with those thoughts to digest along with your lunch, and then we'll come back, let us say, give you time for a comfortable lunch. We'll have a discussion period, maybe 12:30. Okay, so we end with the sharing of the merits. Sharing the merits with the devas, the bhutas or fair spirits, the nagas, the dragon spirits, and so on. Wishing them to protect the Buddha's teaching, to protect the world, to protect ourselves and others. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasadam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva Chirang rakantu mang parang. Okay, the next one in the short way. Eta vatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapana rupya rupicha sanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, we'll end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. Okay, we have the class next Saturday, also in the library. And next Saturday, we'll take Sutta number 112 in the Majjhima Nikaya. And remember, we'll have the discussion starting 12:30 today.